Rouge Radio. How we doing out there, Canada? My name is Tyler Bieber, the host of the CFL portion here on Rouge Radio. And in case you haven't been following us throughout the day, we have a huge guest here coming up in just seconds, the head coach, the very first head coach of the Ottawa RedBlacks, Rick Campbell, is going to join me in just a few seconds. We'll talk to him about the expansion draft, things that made him take the job in Ottawa, and a couple of other things that may have influenced him in the past. So we'll have him on the show. After we talk to Rick, we're going to break it down a little bit, go through the expansion draft players that the Ottawa RedBlacks selected and how they may factor in as we head on towards 2014 free agency and, of course, training camp and, of course, the 2014 CFL season. But right now, he is on the line, the inaugural head coach of the Ottawa RedBlacks, Rick Campbell. Thank you for joining us here on Rouge Radio. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
I am doing perfect that we have you on the program here. How are things going thus far in the early stages of an upstart organization? You're looking to make an impact right from day one next season. How have you had a handle on the job so far?
It's been really good. We know we have a lot of work ahead of us, but we're working hard every day to get better and working hard to put a coaching staff together and acquire players, and we're happy so far, but we know we have a lot of work to do.
You mentioned the coaching staff, and how quickly do you think we can expect that we might start to see some pieces, perhaps on offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, stuff like that?
Should be right away. We're just making sure we all have the contracts and all that stuff done. When I interviewed for the job, I had a pretty good idea what I wanted to do coaching staff-wise, so we're trying to get that together as fast as we can and hopefully have an announcement sooner than later.
Now, when you took the job and you got the interviews with the Ottawa RedBlacks, Marcel Desjardins, what was your biggest influence or your biggest reason that you wanted to go to Ottawa and become the very first head coach of an organization that had, at the time, very few players? Obviously, now you have a few more with the expansion draft. But what was a big reason for you to take this job?
Couple things. Just observing it from the outside as I saw the dedication the owners had. You know, they spent a good 5 years of putting this together the right way, and the CFL. You know, it wasn't a rush to try to get the team on the field as fast as they could. They took the time. There's a new stadium being built. They're in it for the long haul, so that was one piece of the puzzle. Also, Marcel Desjardins, when I had the chance to interview, I just seemed to mesh with him well as far as philosophically and all that type of stuff, and it just seemed like a good fit. I was always a guy that wanted to be a head coach, but not a head coach at all costs. I wanted to make sure that it was a good fit for me and that I was a good fit for the team.
Now, of course, having the years of experience that you do in the CFL, you were around the last time the Ottawa team was around, the Renegades at that time. Of course, they folded very quickly after that. Is there anything that you guys as an organization have looked at from that past Ottawa franchise to move away from anything they may have done wrong to ensure that you succeed and are a sustained franchise in the CFL for many, many years to come?
Yeah, I think, I wasn't a part of that, so I can't speak to it directly, but I do know that the owners and the CFL, like I just had mentioned, took a long time, or they took all the time that they needed to make sure it was done right and that there was a good stadium and all that part of it, and that they would be financially, they'd be fine for several years. It wasn't just kind of a fly-by-night, let's see if we can throw this thing together and see if it works. It was local ownership that wants to see it done right, and I've known from myself of being in the CFL for a long time that Ottawa is important to the league and it makes the league better. And so we're going to make sure we can put on a good on-field product, that's for sure.
Now, of course, you're the son of a legend in the CFL, Hugh Campbell. A huge help, I'm sure, when you're trying to break into the coaching world. But the guy I wanted to know a little bit more about specifically with helping you get to where you are now as a head coach is the head coach of the last team you were with when you were defensive coordinator with the Calgary Stampeders, and John Huffnagel, and he's been around for a very long time. What sorts of things did he teach you or that you observed with him every day in practice that are going to help you with the Ottawa RedBlacks?
Yeah, well, they would be too long to list. Huff, the thing I like about Huff is he understands all aspects of the team. He's been an assistant coach, he's been a head coach, he's been a player. He's done all the things, and so he gets where everybody's coming from the trainer to the equipment guy to the starting quarterback to whoever it is. And I think that's a big thing, is that every person is important. You need to treat people well, and football really is a people business, just like many other businesses are, and I think he gets it, and that's what I've learned from him.
Speaking with Rick Campbell, the very first head coach of the Ottawa RedBlacks. Rick, the expansion draft. Did you guys get most of the targets that you were looking for, or did some teams protect some unexpected players that you didn't necessarily think they would, and of course you missed out on them?
Well, we got a few guys late that we were pleased with. Marcel and his staff, they did a lot of homework. This whole past season, they spent all their time evaluating the league. And I came in late in the last couple of weeks to give a different point of view, just so that I gave kind of a coach's point of view, and also looking at it from being the defensive coordinator in Calgary, I just had a different perspective. So we had some good discussions, but they did so much homework that there weren't any big surprises. So it paid off, and that we got a lot of good players. And then the thing that was a pleasant surprise for us is we got a few guys late that we didn't necessarily know we would get.
One of those guys, is that perhaps the safety, Eric Fraser, that you had in Calgary?
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can get a starting guy in that last round of Canadians, big deal, because we had 7 players before that draft started. So any player we can draft that's a proven player in the league and has showed that he can win games, that's a big deal for us. So that was a pleasant surprise.
Obviously, the big name that came out of the draft is the quarterbacks. That seemed to be the discussion throughout the whole year. Kevin Glenn, you saw him every day in practice from the opposite side of the field as the defensive coordinator. What are a couple of the things that he's going to bring to this Ottawa RedBlacks franchise that you saw in Calgary that will benefit this team right from day one?
Well, one, he's a good player. That's number one. He's a proven quarterback that can win games. The other thing about Kevin is he is the ultimate team player, and he keeps his focus on what it takes to win football games. So he's an excellent leader, and that's what we're going to need, because we're going to have a lot of younger guys, and so we're going to rely on some of the older guys that have been around the league, have won a lot of games, and can show the way to the younger guys. So very lucky to have Kevin.
Rick, I know we got you for just a short period of time, so we're going to wrap things up a little bit quick here. What's next for the Ottawa RedBlacks organization? Of course, free agency is still 2 months away. The season is a long ways away here. What sorts of things are you looking to get done, aside from formulating and finalizing your coaching staff?
That's the first step, is the coaching staff. Second is we're going to constantly be looking for free agents, guys on the street, as we call it in football, that every team is looking for in the CFL, is we have to scour Canada and the U.S. for guys. That's going to be a big part of it. Like you said, free agency in mid-February, we're going to have to find a few guys there as well. And then the Canadian draft in May is going to be another piece of the puzzle. So we're going to have to make as many good decisions as we can, work as a group, as the coaches and the personnel department, and find as many good players as we can so that we can line up in June and be competitive.
All right, Rick, I'm going to let you go here. Just wanted to thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us here, and we wish you all the best as we roll on here towards the 2014 CFL season.
Thanks for having me, and have a good night.
www.ottawaredblacks.com. Check out the website there, the official website of the Ottawa RedBlacks. Tickets, information on players, information on the head coach, Rick Campbell, who we just spoke to. I think he's going to do a great job, Ottawa RedBlacks. He's excited. That's always a good thing. Obviously, when you're starting out as a head coach, you always want to be excited, right? But I sense a little bit of just, that certain spunk that a coach might have. And talked about it before with Corey Chamberlain of the Saskatchewan Roughriders or Scott Milanovic with the Toronto Argonauts, the previous two Grey Cup winning head coaches. And I think Rick Campbell is going to do a fantastic job with the Ottawa RedBlacks. Of course, being a startup franchise, it might be a little bit difficult at first, but they are a lot better off now than they were with the Ottawa Renegades 10 years ago when they started playing the 2003 or 2002, 11 years ago rather, CFL season. And quarterbacks, we talked about it. Kevin Glenn, going to be a huge benefit for this Ottawa RedBlacks organization. 24 players is what they got to take in the expansion draft. They took 3 from each team. Talked about the setup in the past. We'll run it down here. First round was the import draft. They took the 2 quarterbacks. First was Kevin Glenn from the Calgary Stampeders. The other quarterback was Thomas DeMarco of the BC Lions. And it'll be interesting to see how the training camp battle goes with these 2 quarterbacks. They also have Matt Faulkner, the free agent signing. I'm sure they're going to add 1, maybe 2 other quarterbacks as well. Henry Burris, Zach Collaros, they're free agents. I'm not sure Ottawa's going to be looking at that. I don't think they will. But, of course, you never know. Other import players, defensive line. They took 2 defensive linemen. Moulton Hopkins, who we've had on the program here before, taken from the Montreal Alouettes. Jonathan Williams from the Toronto Argonauts. And then the other 4 guys were offensive players. The running back, Siobhan Walker from the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He had a fantastic 2012 rookie season with the Tiger Cats, but last season just fell off the face of the earth with the organization. A part of the reason, though, was injury. And I mean, obviously you have to be healthy to be on the field and make an impact. And unfortunately for Siobhan Walker, that wasn't the case. And he kind of lost his job to CJ Gable for more than one reason. It was the injury, but it was also the play of CJ Gable. And they were fine with CJ Gable. And Kent Austin said himself that he thinks that Gable is the best all-around back in the Canadian Football League. And of course, you may be more likely to tout one of your players when you're coaching them. But clearly feeling strong with CJ Gable and Hamilton. And so Siobhan Walker moves from the Tiger Cats to the Red Blacks. They took 2 receivers, Wallace Miles from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and Carlton Mitchell from the Edmonton Eskimos. And they're not necessarily household names. You don't look at a CFL roster and the first thing you think at receiver is, hey, they have Wallace Miles. Hey, it's Carlton Mitchell. I mean, the whole parameter. You look at the guys they take. And aside from, Kevin Glenn, you might know Thomas DeMarco. If you really, really follow the league, you'll know all these other players. But Wallace Miles and Carlton Mitchell, maybe not so much. But I think they're going to do very well for the Ottawa RedBlacks organization. They're young. They made some impact plays when they did get a chance late in the season last year. I believe Wallace Miles had a 100-yard receiving game for the Blue Bombers against the Toronto Argonauts. And Carlton Mitchell made some nice plays himself for the Eskimos. The other player they took in the import draft, first round, James Lee, an offensive lineman from the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And you think, okay, what would they have had available here? We didn't get the protected lists just because of a CFL, protection. They didn't want it to get out for various reasons. But James Lee, offensive lineman, is where the Ottawa RedBlacks went. And when I was listening to the draft and they said offensive lineman, the first thing that came to my head is, did they not protect Xavier Fulton, the outstanding left tackle? But obviously they did. Ottawa went for the backup, James Lee, a likely candidate to start at left tackle for the Ottawa RedBlacks from day one. And then you move on to round 2, the Canadians. And this is where the draft got really, really interesting. You look at some of these names and you think, really? But yeah. It's true. Here we go. Montreal Alouettes, they took Patrick Lavoie. Had an outstanding rookie season in 2012. Fell off with an injury last season, though. Didn't have as big of an impact with the Montreal Alouettes. But if Ottawa can use Patrick Lavoie in the way that Montreal did with Anthony Calvillo in 2012, bringing him in those tight end sets, I think they'll find some success with Patrick Lavoie. He had 33 receptions for 307 yards and 4 touchdowns in that rookie season. Only had 6 receptions for 46 yards this past season, but of course, as mentioned, was a little bit injured. Can play special teams as well, and that seemed to be a big theme here. They took James Green, a linebacker from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, a special teams demon. And the Winnipeg Blue Bombers didn't exactly have the greatest talent available for Canadian players, so Ottawa goes with the special teams player, guy who can make an impact just like that. You know what he's going to give you. 20 special teams tackles last season with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Not going to factor in on your every down defensive situation, but you have to have the special teams players, right? And Rick Campbell was a special teams coordinator. He knows how important that facet of the game is. And as a head coach, you have to be weary of all 3 phases of the game. And we've talked about it in the past with Mike O'Shea and what he wants to do with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and how he wants to have his special teams as one of the most dominant factors on a football team. And while a lot of people may think in the CFL that offense wins championships and offense wins you a football game, special teams is really starting to become a big part of the game. And with a couple of these coaches who used to be special teams coordinators, I think you're going to start to see that in Ottawa as well as Winnipeg. The biggest surprise, based on reaction from Twitter, Facebook, the news, you listen to the radio, all that stuff, Keith Shologan, the defensive tackle from the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Now, it was going to be somebody good. It didn't matter who it was. The Saskatchewan Roughriders knew they were going to lose a very talented Canadian player. The only way that they may not have done that is if Ottawa selected a quarterback from them, and it would have had to been either pending free agent Drew Willie or the third stringer Tino Sunseri. But I think Ottawa not only looked at Drew Willie and Tino Sunseri and thought they were better off with Glenn and DeMarco, but you also look at the other aspect. And I mentioned this on Twitter during the draft. Why would Ottawa want to take a quarterback from the Saskatchewan Roughriders and give them 2 additional players to protect in the Canadian draft? You take somebody who can start for you, as they did in James Lee, the left tackle, and then you take one of their top Canadians because you can only protect 6. And that is exactly what the Ottawa RedBlacks did in selecting Keith Shologan, the defensive tackle. You look at who the Saskatchewan Roughriders could have and likely did protect as Canadian assets. You have Rob Bagg, a receiver. And then you have the fantastic offensive line. And pretty much I think what it would have came down to for Brendan Taman is which side of the football can you afford to lose. You can't lose Brendan Labatt. He would have been protected. You can't lose Dominic Picard. You just re-signed him to a contract. He's your starting center. Ben Heenan, the 23-year-old prospect of the University of Saskatchewan. You had Ricky Foley, the defensive end. You had Chris Best, another offensive lineman. And so you look at the guys who they could have protected. They may have protected Chris Milo, the kicker, as well. Craig Butler, the linebacker, another guy. And you think, okay, Keith Shologan, likely the lesser valued player in this situation. And I mean, you can argue it. Ricky Foley is getting up there in age, sure, but he still led the CFL in 2 categories on defense last year, as he tweeted himself. If you follow Ricky Foley on Twitter, you know how upset he is about people thinking that he's getting near the end of his career at the age of 31, as he will be in training camp this year. Moving along from the Toronto Argonauts, the Ottawa RedBlacks selected Joe Appel. From the Hamilton Tiger Cats, took John Delahunt. From the Edmonton Eskimos, they selected Alex Krosnick. From the Calgary Stampeders, it was Jamichael Dean. And from the BC Lions, a fourth offensive lineman, Canadian, fifth total, Matt Albright. And after round 2, we still have to go through 8 more players here, but after round 2, you look at that offensive line, and man, it's young, but it is full of potential. You have a starting center in Alex Krosnick, and then you fill in around him. Joe Appel at guard, perhaps Matt Albright at guard. You have James Lee at your left tackle, maybe Michael Dean at right tackle. Appel could play tackle as well, but I think he's better suited as a guard as the Toronto Argonauts used him as. And then their first pick of the 3rd round even adds to it further, and that was Marwan Hage, the all-star center of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And he's had a little bit of injury trouble, but you think, wow. And perhaps that's one of the players that Rick Campbell was talking about just minutes ago. We talked about Eric Fraser being one of those players, but Marwan Hage. And suddenly your offensive line is 6 deep already, and 6 guys you figure you can count on. We haven't seen a whole bunch of James Lee, so he's a little bit unfounded. But obviously they think he's going to be able to hold his ground at that left tackle position. From the Calgary Stampeders, they selected the safety, Eric Fraser. Talked about him and how he's going to be able to plug in, and he's going to know what to do right away because it's a Rick Campbell team. He was the defensive coordinator of the Calgary Stampeders with Fraser as his safety. He'll plug him in, and he'll be good to go right away. Toronto Argonauts, they selected Jason Pottinger. Another surprise pick, at least I thought, and I know a few more people thought so as well. An outstanding Canadian linebacker, had a little bit of injury trouble in the past, but a guy that you can put in there, you know, like Mike McCullough of the Saskatchewan Roughriders. You have all these other Canadian talented linebackers that just plug in and go. And Jason Pottinger is another special teams player, a guy he's not going to factor in, again, on every defensive situation, but you put him in there, he makes a play when he is, and he can also contribute heavily on special teams. The lone free agent selected by the Ottawa RedBlacks, and this was the deal. You could select anybody you wanted if they weren't protected, whether they were a free agent or not. And what you get with the free agent is their rights. So you select the free agent, you get their rights till February 15th to negotiate. If you can't get a contract done, then anybody can sign. If you do get a contract done, he's obviously your player. And the guy they took was from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, receiver Rory Collert, product of Saskatchewan. You look at the history of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the draft pick that Joe Mack did a couple of years ago in Etsy at 4th overall. And you don't necessarily think that Rory Collert would be the Saskatchewan product breaking out with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but he did so last year. 45 receptions, 493 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And in the CFL, obviously you have the rules where you have to have a certain amount of Canadians in the lineup, 7 as a minimum to start. You need that game-breaking Canadian receiver, at least one of them. Now, I don't know if that's going to be Rory Collert, but as you saw with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, he's a very fine 4th or 5th option, maybe even a 3rd option. I think he could develop into a 3rd option with the Ottawa RedBlacks. You know, Kevin Glenn spreads the field very well, as he did with the Calgary Stampeders. Defensive end, Justin Capicciati, apologize if I got that name wrong, from the Edmonton Eskimos. In this next pick, they cleaned the Saskatchewan Roughriders out at defensive tackle. Zach Evans was the other pick the Ottawa RedBlacks took from the Roughriders. They took Sholigan, then they took his backup, Zach Evans. It was still Levi Steinauer there, as well as Ricky Foley, but 2 defensive tackle selected from the Saskatchewan Roughriders. From the BC Lions, they took defensive end Andrew Marshall, and from the Montreal Alouettes, it was linebacker Jordan Verdoni. Another special teams player. University of Calgary product. Again, while he didn't play for the Calgary Stampeders, a little bit of familiarity there with Rick Campbell being in the same city, same stadium. So those are the 24 players. And you can start to form a little bit of a depth chart. And obviously they have a long way to go in Ottawa. As Rick Campbell was mentioning himself, you have free agency coming up yet. You got to finalize that coaching staff. You have your free agents from the National Football League that you can bring in, Arena Football League, players that aren't currently signed in the CFL that are Canadians that you can bring in and take a look at. But a very nice start for the Ottawa RedBlacks, I think. You have your veteran quarterback, Kevin Glenn, a backup that can be used effectively in the right situation in Thomas DeMarco, and I think a very good and young offensive line, especially those Canadians, Joe Appel, Alex Krosnick, Jamichael Dean, and Matt Albright. Albright was a 2013 draft pick of the BC Lions, and they lose him already to Ottawa. That's the tough business of this expansion draft. The guy's been with the Lions for 1 year and he's already gone. Marwan Hage, the veteran, played in his first Grey Cup game in November. And the fillers, the guys who are going to be your special teams aces, James Green, Jason Pottinger, as we mentioned, Patrick LeBlanc can play a little bit of special teams. But overall, a very nice-looking Ottawa RedBlacks team after the expansion draft. How do you think they're going to do? How does the Ottawa RedBlacks roster look to you right now? Feel free to hit us up on Twitter at Rouge Radio, on Facebook, rougeradio.com as well. You can call in if you like. 347-989-1127 is the number to call. Would love to hear your thoughts on the Ottawa RedBlacks and how they are doing in your eyes as we head on towards the end of the 2013 year and get ready in a couple of months for the 2014 free agent class. And you look at the free agents, and this was the other interesting part of the expansion draft, and a little bit of gamesmanship, and it made sense. I mean, you think about it, and it makes more than enough sense to do this. Have you seen a couple of the re-signings in the days and hours after the expansion draft? This is interesting. The Edmonton Eskimos have re-signed cornerback Joe Burnett and running back Hugh Charles. Now, they may have been protected. They may not have been protected. Winnipeg Blue Bombers GM Kyle Walters himself said that some of his free agents were going to be protected just to ensure that the Ottawa RedBlacks don't have a chance to select them. Now, as mentioned, Rory Collert was the lone free agent selected out of the 24 players. But here's what it is. You get the contract done. You agree to terms verbally with these players, but you don't file the contract. Because if you file the contract, they're signed. And then you would be forced to protect them if you want to keep them. Because Ottawa would have the chance to take them from you, and you would lose them guaranteed because they are no longer a free agent. Now, of course, as mentioned, a little risk involved that they may select these players as free agents and take the chance and try and sign them in 2 months. But a little bit of gamesmanship added to the expansion draft when you look at it from that perspective. Interesting stuff. And you look at the free agent list as a whole, and there is certainly some players here that are going to shake free that Ottawa can look at right away and say, hey, we're in a pretty good situation if we sign this, this, and this. And again, special teams players, they're starting to get a good crop of them already. The other aspect, of course, of the expansion draft is the fallout from the other teams. You know, each team loses 3 players. And Edmonton Eskimos GM Ed Hervey came out himself and said that he wasn't entirely happy about the players he lost. And I mean, why would you be? You lost a promising young starter in Alex Krosnick. You lost a very talented import receiver in Carlton Mitchell, and another young defensive player, defensive lineman, a Canadian, in Justin Capicchiotti. How about the Saskatchewan Roughriders, though, losing Keith Sholigan and Zach Evans? I mean, you think they got off a little bit easier in the import draft just because it's a backup to them, but a bit of a hit there with losing Keith Sholigan. So it'll be interesting to see how the 8 other CFL teams rebound from losing these 3 players each and fill in to help replace these players. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they have their offensive coordinator. Did you hear this? They will bring back Marcel Belfay. He will be the offensive coordinator for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in 2014. Early reaction, reading Twitter, Facebook, all that wonderful stuff that is at our hands and exposed to us every day. Kind of mixed reaction based on what I saw. Some are happy about it, some not so much, feeling that they need to part with everything that was tied to the past 2 losing seasons. But, you know, I like the idea of bringing back Marcel Belfay. I do. You know, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for the longest time last year struggled on offense. They did. I mean, that's not very hard to see. They fired their offensive coordinator, Gary Crowton. Of course, Belfay eventually took over as the interim and is now named the offensive coordinator. But I thought they started to get a little bit more consistency as the season wore on. Max Hall started to become a little bit more comfortable in the offensive system. And the other aspect to that is what Mike O'Shea wants to do. And Mike O'Shea said himself he never once mentioned that the offensive side of the football is going to be what wins the Winnipeg Blue Bombers football games. It's going to be the defense. It's going to be the special teams. And when you think about Marcel Belfay and the past that he has had in the CFL, you know, you don't necessarily think, and here's why the reaction may be negative from some people. You look at Marcel Belfay, you've seen him as the head coach of the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They were 9-9 for a few years, you know, hovering around that 500 mark in others. And you just don't see, you know, the consistent winning. You know, that's been 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down, 2 up, 1 down, 2 down, 1 up, you know, that type of thing. And you don't necessarily affiliate Marcel Belfay with sustained success. But here's why I like this. You have a quarterback now, and yes, Zach Collaros may very likely be the destined starting quarterback of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in 2014. But as it stands right now, Max Hall, he's going to be comfortable in that system if he is the starting quarterback. You know, he's going to have a lot of games under his belt already. He wasn't as spectacular starting out. He was a little bit inexperienced, even though he came from the NFL and had game experience there. But the running game, wherever Marcel Belfait has gone, the running game has been pretty darn good. You look back to his time in Saskatchewan with the Rough Riders when they had Kenton Keith. You know, they were blowing the league away in rushing the football. Had success in Hamilton with DeAndre Cobb. You know, not as much in Montreal when he was the offensive coordinator there, but, I mean, you had only, you know, the greatest quarterback of all time in Canadian football history in Anthony Calvillo. Why would you run the football, you know? Would be silly to run the football when you have Anthony Calvillo on your side. So from that aspect, I think Marcel Belfait will do just fine with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You know, it's not going to be like it would be in, say, Saskatchewan, where you need to push the ball down the field and score points as quickly as possible. You know, or like the Hamilton Tiger Cats, as Henry Burris has showed often, being able to score quick and effectively. That's not what you're looking at with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You're looking at that game management style. You know, the short passes, the high percentage completion rates, the running game. And nobody else is better suited to call those plays than Marcel Belfait, because no slight to Marcel Belfait, but that's what he does best, and that's what he's known for as an offensive coordinator. And that is very likely why the Hamilton Tiger Cats struggled to win so many football games. Because that was the game plan. Teams knew it, and it would only work half the time. Because that's the kind of offense that is only going to work half the time. But if you're Mike O'Shea and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, and you've came out and said that you want to win games on the defense, on the special teams, you know, maybe like the 19-16 type football games, 21-14, that type of thing. You only need 300 yards of offense, 400 yards of offense, you know, 2 touchdowns, maybe 3 in any given game from your offense. You get the talent in place, and I think the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are going to do just fine with this setup of Marcel Belfait as the offensive coordinator. May not work out so well if you had, you know, like a Travis Lulay or a Henry Burris, Darian Durant, Ricky Ray, that type of thing, where you have to try and throw the football down the field. But they'll be fine with Marcel Belfait. I wouldn't fret if I was a fan of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Going on in the CFL. Montreal Alouettes offensive lineman Andrew Woodruff chose to retire. Team also announced the signings of linebacker Jonathan Boulot-Richard, as well as receiver Chris Dobko. Now, Woodruff, native of Victoria, BC, played guard for the Montreal Alouettes. Taken 12th overall in the second round of the 2008 CFL draft, was a member of the back-to-back Grey Cup championship teams in 2009 and 2010 with the Montreal Alouettes. Started 49 games out of 61 regular season appearances. 28 years old. Unfortunate, and the downside to the game of football, of course, is what I'm about to mention next. Sat out for the majority of the 2013 season due to a concussion. And for Andrew Woodruff, you look at it and you think that he decided that his health and his future was more important than continuing on in a game of football and coming off a year in which he missed 16 games with a concussion and concussion-like symptoms. And I mean, you can't blame him. This could start to be the way of the world in football, whether it's the CFL or the NFL. Guys retiring at a rather young age due to all the concerns about head trauma. You know, Anthony Calvillo is likely to retire too. Obviously, he's a little bit older, but again, suffered from a concussion this past year. That's the downside to this game that we love so much. But, you know, you move on. Wish Andrew all the best in his future endeavors, of course. Now, the two players they signed, Jonathan Boulot-Richard, was with the Alouettes for a little bit of time last year. Was originally with the Hamilton Tiger Cats on their practice roster, but was released. Had a season-ending ankle injury last year. Was a standout with the Montreal Caribbeans under the defensive coordinator of the Montreal Alouettes, Noel Thorpe. And Chris Dobko, the receiver. 5-year career with the Calgary Dinos. 5th most touchdowns of all time at 15. And was the school's all-time leading receiver in receptions with 155. Promising young prospect for the Montreal Alouettes in Chris Dobko. Other news going on, and this one made me a little bit happy because he's trying to bounce back from a rather devastating 2 injuries, and that would be the Edmonton Eskimos, and they announced a contract extension with quarterback Matt Nichols. You know, he's coming off, he had the injury, if you remember, in the playoff game against the Toronto Argonauts in 2012. Signed with the franchise as a free agent in October of 2010, and then missed this entire past season after injuring his knee in a preseason game. And while we talk about guys like Andrew Woodruff retiring due to concussions and other stuff like that, you know, it's encouraging to see that Matt Nichols isn't giving up on football. 2 knee injuries, obviously they're different injuries, but Nichols going to give it another go. We'll see how he bounces back. We wish him all the best. Hopefully he's able to bounce back and come through and compete for that job with Mike Riley. And, you know, we talked about it before, and we even had Mike Riley on the show and what Matt Nichols has been able to do while he was sidelined this year. And Matt Nichols probably would have given Mike Riley a pretty good push for that starting quarterback job if not for the injury. And that was the word day one from head coach at the time, Gavis Reed. Now it's obviously Chris Jones. But they like what they see in Matt Nichols when he has played in the past. They'll give him another shot, and it's great to see that he wants to continue playing football and get over the injuries. Eskimos also announced the extension of the contract of Mike Miller, product of Acadia, special teams demon for the Edmonton Eskimos, led the team in tackles on special teams with 18, and was second on the team in the other 2 seasons that he has played in Edmonton. Lots going on in the Canadian Football League. Of course, the expansion draft, we touched on that heavily. A little bit of other news. This is going to be our last show of 2013. Next show will be in the new year. Can you believe it's the new year coming up? 2 weeks. Crazy how time flies. Before you know it, we'll be talking about free agency and who went where the week after February 15th. And then before you know it, it's going to be the 2014 CFL season. The Ottawa RedBlacks will be playing. It's going to be great. That's going to do it for us tonight here on Rouge Radio. Hope you enjoyed listening to the program. If you missed it, please check out the podcast. We had the inaugural head coach of the Ottawa RedBlacks, Campbell, on the program at the top of the hour. Please do check that out. And as mentioned, that'll do it for us for the 2013 year. We'll be back in 2 weeks talking about more CFL action here on Rouge Radio. I am your host, Tyler Bieber. Thanks for joining us tonight. And as always, on the program, you have yourself a very happy holidays, Christmas season, whatever you celebrate. Take care out there. Enjoy yourselves. Have a drink for me. And we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks in 2014 here on Rouge Radio.